In the late 1950s, French scholar, author, editor, and activist Roger Caillois had read the preceding works in the field of ludology, otherwise known as game studies, and was not entirely convinced. While he agreed with what was, at the time, the work of the most well-known scholar in the field, Johann Huizinga, on some points, Caillois couldn't help but notice some contradictions and omissions in Huizinga's definitions of play and games. So, in his 1958 work, later translated to English as Man, Play and Games, he made this list of definitions. According to Caillois, play is free, you can't force someone to do it. Separate, it has its own place and time, separate from the rest of our lives. Uncertain, you can't predict exactly what will happen or what the outcome will be beforehand. Governed by its own rules instead of the normal rules we operate under. Make-believe, the player must be aware of this made-up reality, or unreality, in which the play happens. And unproductive, it can't produce anything. No goods or wealth can be generated. Professional sport, for example, is no longer play, it becomes work. Things can change hands between players, but nothing new can be created. Caillois called special attention to this last point, as he included it to counter Huizinga's definition that no profit can be gained from play, which would imply gambling both as a game in and of itself and as an aspect of a larger game could not be considered play. By shifting his definition to include situations where money did change hands, but across all players involved, there was no overall change in material wealth, Caillois could include gambling in his model of play. Now, this definition is all well and good, but Caillois wasn't done. He had observed that while all play did seem to follow this definition, the many ways people and games approached play could be categorized further. With this in mind, he devised a system. Caillois categorized games in two different ways. One was by their focus, which he believed the core aspect of the game to be, where the play was emerging from. He defined 4 categories like this. First, agon, from the Greek word for conflict or contest. Agon games invoke play through competition. These games will have a clear win-lose condition as the core premise. A team shooter, like the Overwatch series, involves direct competition. You making progress, for example killing an enemy team member, directly interferes with your competitor's progress, because now they have to fight with one less player until that team member respawns. A racer, among other genres, like the Forza series, may involve more parallel competition, in which each competitor's progress might be independent from the others, and the victor is determined by who was best by some metric. In Forza's case, likely speed, but it could be skill or some other measurement. Next, he defined alea, from the Latin for chance, dice, and hazards. Alea is the category where gambling falls. The play in aleatory games comes from reacting to and interacting with chance-based elements, leading to risk and sometimes reward. Some video games, such as slot machine simulators, are primarily aleatory in nature, but gamers will most often encounter alea in smaller parts, like drawing from your deck in card battlers like Hearthstone, or in the loot box mechanics found across a frankly painfully large swathe of the video game industry. Making use of an English word this time, Caillois defines mimicry as play that involves pretending to be something you are not. Essentially, escapism. The first example that comes to mind in gaming is the RPG. You are literally playing a role. In a world like that of the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, you are thrown into a world different from your own and set free to experience it in any way you see fit. The other prime example is the simulation genre, in which a game like Cities Skylines gives you the opportunity to control the growth of an entire city, which is a, I guess, possible, but likely unreachable goal for most in the real world. Finally, Caillois defined illings, from the ancient Greek for whirlpool or dizziness, as play that seeks out vertigo and exhilaration. He posited that seeking out a shock, fear, or other strong emotional reaction resulting in brief panic and discombobulation was a form of play, like children deliberately spinning until they felt dizzy. In the gaming world, this is best represented by horror games, like Scott Cawthon's Five Nights at Freddy's. These games deliberately build up fear and tension higher and higher until they bring it all crashing down with a jump scare, invoking that shock, that feeling of illinks. Now, these 4 categories are useful for game design and evaluation, but as I mentioned, Caillois also used a second system to categorize play. Something both Caillois and Huizinga agreed upon was that play had something to do with boundaries. Both defined play as being bound in a specific time and place, separate from real life. Huizinga talked about a magic circle, which contained the game within the boundaries of its phenomenological world, that is, the world experienced by the player, and that the game ceased to function once the circle was broken. Caillois defined play as being governed by its own rules, its own boundaries. So, Caillois proposed a spectrum of play. At one end was complete freedom, absolutely no boundaries on what the play could be or do. He called this freedom, like a child playing make-believe, paideia. At the other end was strictly bound, unimaginative play, which left barely any room for variation from the boundaries. He called this ludus, but noted that no one game was entirely ludic or paidaic. Instead, all games exist somewhere on a spectrum between the two. This notion of boundaries being an important concept when defining and categorizing games has continued in ludology and has led to many expanding on Caillois' original definitions of paideia and ludus. Attempts to clarify the differences between them have highlighted how rules and freedom, play and game are not mutually exclusive categories, and perhaps the continuum from one to the other is the wrong way to visualize what Caillois was saying. One 2023 paper from Leyland Massick at Tampere University argued that paideia and ludus could instead be defined by how play interacted with and was affected by its boundaries. Massick defines paideia as an experience where normal boundaries are temporarily removed, allowing for extended freedom and exploration. He defines ludus as the artificial imposition of boundaries to create challenge and play. The idea that we must adopt a lusory attitude, which is to accept rules as real despite there being no reason outside of the game to do so. Under Massick's definitions, he argues paideia and ludus can exist at the same time, supporting the notion that the strict rules of game do not strangle play but instead promote and shape it. A game like Portal, for instance, becomes simultaneously ludic and paidaic as the normal rules of physics are thrown out the window, but the new rules of aperture science, GLaDOS, and the portal gun now restrict the player in other ways, creating the game, or magic circle, from 2 different angles. Massick, however, wasn't done, going on to define 2 additional categories of play in relation to boundaries, lila and muho. Massick takes the word lila from Sanskrit, where it represented the concept that the gods are playful in their creation, destruction, and manipulation of the world. He defines lila as play through the manipulation of boundaries. Lila play involves shaping the rules of the game as needed and adapting them on the fly. This is commonly seen in the way TTRPGs like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder are played, but can be seen in gaming through the puzzler Baba Is You, in which the player can push blocks around which contain segments of rules, using them to create new rules which completely change how the game world is interacted with. Finally, Massick defines muho, a Buddhist phrase meaning lawless, as play through the deliberate breaking of boundaries. Think of the kid sneaking out their window at night to go meet with their friend. Muho can be the breaking of ludic, game-imposed boundaries, like what we see in the speedrunning community, which involves deliberately breaking out of the boundaries of the game, in many cases literally, in order to reach some goal in the shortest possible time. On the other hand, muho can also be what ludologists Mortensen and Jorgensen called transgressive gameplay. That is, the player using the acceptable medium of a game to break the boundaries of society. For example, when playing Dishonored, a transgressive gamer might kill every NPC that they come across. This is not breaking the ludic rules of Dishonored, which absolutely allows for this, but it is a playful breaking of the social stigma of violence against others. What I've gathered from all of this is that while there are many elements that go into defining and categorizing play and/or games, and many different interpretations of how to do so correctly, most seem to agree that boundaries, whether in real life or the simulated world, form a key component of what makes play unique as a human behavior, and understanding our relationship with boundaries could be invaluable to informing good game design in the future.